Know that this presentation is being recorded and we'll begin very shortly with introductions. Over to you, Deneen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. My name is Deneen Diamond. I'm the lead for the Center of Excellence for Health. We're so excited to have our special guest here today. Andy Tree is joining us and celebrating wildlife learning, Take It Outside. I know that we have some teachers on listening, but also many teachers that will be watching the recording. So I'm going to hand it over to Peter, but thank you both. And thanks everybody for attending.
Okay, thank you. My name is Peter Trusiak. I'm a subject coordinator for science and experiential learning with Anglophone West. And we're very happy to have Andy Tree here to talk to us about trees today in a virtual environment. And this is part of Take It Outside, Wildlife Learning, Take It Outside Week. And we know that you've been cooped up indoors the last few days because of the frigid temperatures. So hopefully this presentation sparks you to get outside and to learn about the outdoors and connect with the land and the water. And if you have questions during this presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, or Miss Harvey's class, you can turn on the camera, raise your hand, and ask a question directly to Andy if you feel comfortable doing that. And without further ado, I want to pass things over to Andy. Andy, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today, and have a good presentation.
Thank you for the invitation. And yes, Mrs. Harvey's class, I do very much encourage, if possible, I'd love to be able to hear you for some of these things. I don't want to spend the entire hour talking at you. I'd love for this to be interactive, but obviously that's completely up to you and your class and your comfort level. I'm going to take us through, but please, please, please do interrupt me at any time with questions. Like I said, I don't want to talk at you for an hour. The irony of Take It Outside Week being a virtual presentation is not lost on me. So all I hope for that I can do today is teach you something exciting about a tree or trees or forests or what they do for us. And then the next time you're walking and you walk past a tree, that you think of something that you've learned or think of something that was exciting today. So please do stop me at any time. First things first. Oh, awesome. I can see you. That's great. So first things first, why should you listen to me about trees? Well, plain and simple, my last name is Tree. That's no, but that is something I have to joke about because I work in forestry and I have the last name Tree. People joke about it all the time. I am a marketing and communications manager at Forest New Brunswick. Forest New Brunswick represents the people who make things with trees, forest product producers for the province. And most of my job is just to find out ways for people to learn or to understand forestry, trees, everything like that, and get them excited or understanding that. So all my job is really to take hard concepts like trees and forests and forestry and try and make it more accessible, more understandable. So I'm really excited. I was mentioning before the class got started, I'm a lot more comfortable talking to university and high school levels. So please do stop me, ask questions, everything like that. First things first, I want to start with the absolute basics. What is a tree? Can anyone help me and tell me what are some of the parts of a tree? A tree is a perennial plant. It's got an elongated stem and it supports branches and leaves. But can anyone name some of the parts of a tree? I see some hands up. I'm not sure if I'll be able to hear you, but
Teachers, feel free to put some answers in the chat as well from your students.
oh, I've got lots of hands coming up. I think you're on mute though, so there we go.
Okay, Rowan. There are leaves. Okay. Come close, nice and close.
There are leaves on trees.
Leaves on trees.
There are
awesome.
Okay, Shania.
There is a trunk.
Trunk. Perfect. Yes, that's one of the defining characteristics. I love it.
Mason.
Bark.
There's bark.
Bark. Yes. The bark protects the trunk. It's the outer layer. Awesome.
Liam.
There's a root.
Ooh, a root.
Perfect. I was hoping you guys, great job. Here's a picture. You guys basically got them all. That's great. Awesome. So we've got leaves on top. Those are supported by branches. The branches grow from the trunk, and the trunk and the rest of the tree is supported by a system of roots underground. Now, taking a look at this tree, does anyone know how we can tell how old a tree is? Anyone in your class know how you can tell how old a tree is? I'll give you a hint. This little section of the tree might help. So you can count, or you can tell how old a tree is based on how many rings there are from the center of the tree to the outside. So if we take a look, I'm going to zoom in on this little section here. Each one of these rings, the darker portions are where the tree slows down its growth. So that's usually in the winter. In the summer, it grows fast because trees get bigger every year. So the lighter parts are where it's grown throughout the summer. So taking a look at this tree, and you might have to get closer to actually see it on your screen. I'm not sure how this setup is. Can anyone tell me how old they think this tree is? Oh, I see some hands. Love it.
Parker, how old do you think the tree is?
50.
50. David, come close.
77.
77. Okay, we'll take one more. Adam, how old do you think the tree is?
I think it is 12.
12. I
I
think
think
there's
I know.
Eli. What last one?
20,000. There I am.
Oh, I don't think there's 20,000 rings there.
So let's count them together. So I hope you can see here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is great. 13. We just have the outer layer, that extra layer at the end. So this tree in this example is 13 years old. And something that's kind of cool, when you have a cross section of a tree, like a little slice from where it was cut down or something like that, this right here, when you can see the entire tree, a cross section of it is called a cookie, which sounds kind of silly, but when you take a thin slice of a tree, it does actually look like a cookie. So if there's one thing you can remember, a slice of a tree is called a cookie. One of the cool things is scientists and people working in forests can actually count these rings without cutting a tree down. They have this big screw that it's called an increment bore, but they can screw it in straight to the center of the tree, pull it out, and they can actually see these lines without cutting the whole tree down. Because sometimes you want to know how old a tree is without cutting it down. So you can actually do that, but you can always tell how old a tree is. So if you're ever walking through the park and you see a tree that's been cut down, you can go and start counting the lines and see how old it is. So around Canada, we have two main types of trees. So does anyone know what this kind of tree is called? Any tree with, in this picture, it's kind of needles, but anything with needles. Anyone know what that's called? It's called, a lot of people like to call them evergreen trees because they stay green throughout the winter, which isn't always true of all of them. But an evergreen tree is a conifer or a softwood tree. We've got other ones, and it's written right up here. The trees with leaves on them, broadly speaking, are called deciduous trees, but most people know them as hardwood trees. Hardwood trees start from a seed, and conifers start from typically some form of a cone as their type of seed. Now, something cool, when you see a tree with needles, needles are actually leaves. They've just evolved differently hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. But all needles are actually leaves, but leaves aren't needles. It's just kind of funny that way. So there's a couple trees you might know already. So let's talk about one of our famous or most famous hardwood or deciduous trees here in Canada. Anyone know what this one's called? I'll give you the hint because it's on our flag. Does anyone know what kind of tree that is?
What do we think it is? Ryan? A maple tree.
Perfect. Perfect. Canada's national tree is a maple tree. And maple leaf is on our flag, and it's one of our most iconic trees. And we've got all sorts of different types of maples here, red maples, sugar maples. Any maple tree is Canada's national tree, which is pretty cool. I'll give you one that's a little bit harder. I'll be really impressed if someone knows it. What is New Brunswick's tree? Show you. It's this one here on the left. So this is the tree of New Brunswick. I'll be really, really impressed if anyone knows. Anyone happen to know?
Martins, what do you think?
Pine tree.
A pine tree.
It's a really good guess.
Anyone else want to take a guess? Rowan, what do you think?
Spike tree.
Spike tree.
I like it. It is kind of spiky. It's actually one of the more friendly needle trees. I'll give you one more hint. And most people don't know the name of this, even the adults I ask. You might see this particular tree a little more often looking like that.
Oh, oh. Okay. Friendly. Come here.
Say Douglas. Douglas fir.
It's actually the balsam fir, which is very similar to the Douglas fir. Great guess. It's a friendly fir. You can tell the needles aren't sharp, so you can usually tell a fir from a pine because the needles aren't too sharp. It's friendlier to touch. The balsam fir is New Brunswick's provincial tree, and it's one of the most common Christmas trees we see on the eastern seaboard here. So that's really cool. If you get a fresh Christmas tree each year, you might be putting up our provincial tree here in the province. And what's even cooler is New Brunswick ships so many Christmas trees down to the States because they want our beautiful trees to decorate for their Christmas. We send over 100,000 Christmas trees south of the border per year, which is really, really cool. The place I buy my Christmas tree from also does all the Christmas trees for Harvard University. Cool. You'd never know it. Anyway, New Brunswick's provincial tree is called the balsam fir. And I say provincial tree because all of our provinces and territories have their own tree. So we've got some spruces, some oaks, birch, pine, more spruce and birch and pine. We've got a cedar over on the west coast, tamarack up north in the territories. But for the most part, you see a lot of firs, a lot of spruces, and a lot of pines and birch. So, does anyone want to take a guess how many different species of trees are native to Canada? This is a hard question, but you can take a guess. How many different types of trees do you think are native to Canada? And that's by that I mean they've grown here for hundreds of years. Yeah, what's up? What do you think?
300.
300.
That's a really good guess. It's a little less, but 300 is almost spot on when you include all the trees that aren't native to Canada that we've brought over. So super great guess. Less than 300. Anyone else want to try?
David, come on up. What do you think? How many? Less than 300.
50.
Good guess. There's actually about 50 in New Brunswick. So it's more than 50, less than 300. One more guess.
Eli. Less than 300, more than 50. Math lesson.
12.
More than 50.
There's about 140 different trees native to Canada. Really great guesses, everyone. So, does everyone remember a few slides ago I said trees start from a seed or from a cone in the case of conifers? This is how a tree grows. So it starts as a little seed, falls into the ground, gets planted in the ground, grows up a little bit. A baby tree, a little young tree is called a sapling. And then it takes years and years to grow a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, to become a big old tree where you get a mature tree. And then the That tree makes seeds of its own to make more trees, or sometimes as it gets older, it might die and more trees can and that's part of the life cycle of a tree where those nutrients I'm not sure how the nutrient cycle at this grade level, but those nutrients go back into the soil. It does release carbon during that stage. And sometimes when we have a mature tree, we actually cut it down on purpose to make something out of it, like something made out of wood, a forest product, something, some lumber, houses. We're going to talk about forest products a little bit more. Almost all of the times when we harvest a tree, when we take it to make something out of it, we either replant that manually or we regrow it. That's actually the law. And I'll talk about that a little bit more too. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about today is how our trees help us. Can anyone think, oh, I see some hands up. You got a question?
They help us breathe.
They help us breathe. That's great. Okay, let's see how many different things we can think of how they help. That's absolutely correct. I'm going to talk about that in a second. What else do trees do for us?
What else do trees do for us? Parker?
Trees help you breathe.
Yeah, we said that
Absolutely.
one. Anything
Perfect.
else?
Anything else?
Liam?
I don't know if this is true, but I think moss sometimes grows food.
Trees grow food.
Yes. Love that. Absolutely.
I have another one. They
Alaska.
change different color.
Yeah. Oh, they're
And
really
another
beautiful.
one.
Absolutely. All right, one more.
I have
One
another
more. Henley. Someone on the mat who's nice and close. How do trees help us?
Can you tell me?
No, what do you think?
My brain is
You want to think? Brian, come on up. Maybe you can help Henley out. Brian can help you out. How do the trees help us, Ryan? What do you think?
They bring nature to us.
They bring nature to us.
I love it. Okay.
They
So
bring nature.
here's some that I want to talk about. So one of the things, trees are home to a lot of things, not just people. So in addition to helping us, they help a lot of creatures out. So one of the first things I want to talk about is how trees are home. Forests, which are just basically a whole bunch of trees, are home to about 80% of all the plants and animals that live on land. Can you help me think of any animals or any creatures or plants even that make their home in a tree? Big hint on screen for at least one of them.
Haley?
They're home for birds.
Yes.
Home
Nice.
for birds? Adam, what do
What
you
else?
think? Oh, you're chewing. Alaska, what else do you think trees are homes for?
Squirrels.
Squirrels.
Squirrels, absolutely.
Adam. What are trees home to? So we said birds, squirrels. What is it? But who lives in trees? Or what lives in trees?
Woodpeckers.
Woodpeckers.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Eli,
what do the
what is it?
woodpeckers eat that live in trees?
Oh, what do they eat?
Yes, insects. Absolutely. Trees are
Bees.
Bees. Okay.
trees are home to a lot of different creatures and animals, and even things like moss and lichen. Those are other plants that grow on the side of the tree itself, or even fungi. So, someone said trees clean our air. That's absolutely true. Have any of you heard of photosynthesis before? Hands up if you have heard of it. All right. So as trees are growing, I showed you this picture earlier, as a tree grows from a little seedling to a sapling all the way up to a big old tree, it takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it gives us oxygen back. That's one of the things we breathe. And in doing so, it takes water and nutrients from the soil, from its roots, and it combines that in a process called photosynthesis, which it uses to grow. And again, it purifies our air, it gives us oxygen. Now, trees are super important for giving us fresh oxygen, but actually, most of our oxygen comes from the ocean, from microorganisms. Now, trees still do a lot for that, and it's so nice when you're out walking through a forest. You can take a big breath and you can smell the fresh air. They're doing a lot for that. And capturing carbon, which is really helpful. A little carbon storage and sequestration is a bit of an advanced topic, but I'm going to give you some things to consider on that later. One of the other things trees do is they clean our water. About two-thirds of our drinking water here in Canada comes from surface waters, which is waters that collect in lakes and reservoirs. And most of that water is captured and filtered through a forested area. They do things like trap sediment and they help capture moisture from the air and the snow and the fog. All of that is really, really important, which is why anytime, even if someone's managing a forest to cut it down to make things out of it, it's always important to leave a buffer zone around any water or water courses. Really, really important. Someone said trees are really pretty. Do you know what? That's a great answer too. Forests and our trees are super important culturally and spiritually. It just feels great to go walk into a forest. And as Canadians, over 90% of our forests are what's called public land, which means we all own them and have rights and access to them. About 7% of trees in the country owned privately. Um, Trees are great in the forest and they're also great in our cities, which is really, really awesome. So when you plant trees between houses and along roads, it cleans our air. It keeps the temperature cooler in the summer. It keeps the wind more tolerable in the winter, keeps it less windy. Urban forests are something that's pretty cool, and you'll see most cities actually have a forester working for them to help manage this. They provide value, they provide habitat for all the plants that live, or plants and animals that live around the city. They reduce noise. They're really, really awesome. Everyone likes a city to be greener than just tall concrete buildings. We like to see trees between them. The last thing I want to talk about, or one of the last things, trees do a lot more than all of this, but I'm keeping it pretty simple today, is trees provide us with products that we use every single day. Now, we've mentioned a few of them already, but I want to give you about 60 seconds. You don't have to all shout them out. I want you to see how many things you can find in your classroom right now that were made from a tree. So I'm going to give you, I'm looking on my watch, I'm giving you about 2 minutes. I want you to find as many things in this room that are made from trees as you can. Alrighty, one more minute.
I think they're busy counting, Andy. Lots of movement going on. I love it.
Love to see it. All right, come on back. I'm gonna I'm gonna show you a few that I think might have been in your classroom. I don't know your classroom that well. And then I'll let you tell me any that you found that I missed. So, hands up If you found a desk or a bookshelf, or maybe your door is even made out of wood, awesome, fantastic. So wood from trees gets made into lots of things like furniture and even the materials that build our houses in a lot of cases. So awesome work. What about hands up if you found a book or a pencil or your notebook? Awesome. So trees get made into lots of composite materials, things like paper, that we make our books and our notebooks and all that out of. Did anyone find cardboard boxes or paper towel? Probably not toilet paper sitting around the house. Yeah, you saw one? I see a couple hands. These are getting harder and harder as we go. Awesome. What about, since someone mentioned it earlier, what about fruits and nuts? Those are things that came from a tree. Did anyone find any of those around the classroom? Awesome. I've got some harder ones that I want to show you, but first of all, what did you find that I missed? Did you find anything that I didn't get?
What did you find that was not shown?
We found our thing to hold our communication bags.
Oh, the wicker basket.
Nice.
Okay. Mila, what did you find that was not mentioned? Alaska. Ooh, Henley stand. Yeah, so some furniture. Rowan.
The stick that we use every morning.
Oh, yes, we have a pointer stick that we found outside.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. I want to show you a few more things that are made from trees that you might not know about, because there's a lot of things we make from trees. All right, here's some first ones. Okay, so we've talked about trees provide us some food. We talked about fruit and even some nuts. Here's some other food. With the fruit, we can make things like juice, apple juice, and then there's things like maple syrup. Who doesn't love maple syrup on their pancakes? And it comes from sugar maple trees, which we have a lot in New Brunswick. Did you know New Brunswick is the third largest producer of maple syrup in the entire world? Third most. This year they produced over 1 million gallons of it. I don't know why they use gallons. Anyway, um, we're the third biggest in the world. Number one is Quebec. They make the most maple syrup in the world, and they're home to Canada's strategic maple syrup reserve, which is a thing. We stockpile maple syrup so we never run out of it. There was a theft of that. It's a cool story. Um, what about, here's some other products. Do you guys have a cork board? Something like this, or you've seen one around? That's made from cork. Cork is the bark of a particular tree, the cork tree. Probably not around the classroom, but wood heating. So some people burn wood to heat their homes or their buildings. And sometimes it's in the form of cuts of logs, and sometimes it's in cool little pellets. I even use wood pellets in my barbecue at home. We don't see as many of these around these days, but we're seeing a lot of them a few years ago. Things like masks, particularly surgical masks and N95 masks, are made out of trees. They're made out of the fibers that we get when we do all sorts of cool processes to the tree, but they're really important for any of those type materials. I'm going to go even further. I want to show you some other things that are made from trees that you might not know about. Some makeup is made out of trees. It's true, it's cool. Some sunscreen is made out of trees. Gum is made from a byproduct of trees. A lot of these are cellulose byproducts. And even some printer inks, when you get a natural printer ink, those are all made from trees as well. Kind of cool. Even more than that, we make clothing out of trees, which is pretty cool. I've got a picture of a shirt here and some underwear. You might be wearing trees on in your underwear. It's cool. We make fibers and fabrics from trees. In fact, New Brunswick, there's there's two mills in New Brunswick that their main export is dissolving grade cellulose fiber, which then gets made into fabric. So if you actually ever see a shirt or any piece of clothing that's made specifically from modal or micromodal, there's a really, really good chance that that's a New Brunswick tree, which is pretty cool if you're ever looking at that. So we can make clothes out of shirts. The t-shirt I'm wearing under this sweater is made from New Brunswick trees. Pretty cool. It's really soft. It's really nice. There's tons and tons of stuff we make out of trees. There's medications. There's fake or natural leather replacement. There's dyes. There's thickening agents. There's perfumes. There's paint thinners. Crayons are made from trees, parts of them anyway, in a lot of cases. And even your devices, your screens, your cell phones or your tablets or your computers, one of the key parts of the screen of a liquid crystal display is actually a byproduct from trees, which is really, really cool. All I mean to say with this is that trees are in a lot more things than you think they are, besides just wood and maybe some fruit. And I think that's really cool. One of the cool things, this is everywhere in New Brunswick that makes things out of trees. These are all the mills. A mill is a place where you take some tree or some lumber and you transform it into something else that we need. And you can see forestry and particularly forest products supports all of New Brunswick because there's mills all over the place, which I think is really, really cool. So I've talked a lot about how our trees help us. I want to talk a little bit about how we help our trees. So the first thing that's really, really important is that we manage our forests in a lot of cases. So managing a forest refers to anything that we do as people to intervene, which means to help or to change how a forest ecosystem is able to achieve its goals. Forest management is done to international standards that we agree to across most of the countries in the world that all agree on the best ways and the best practices to preserve or to help our forests meet certain values, which can be all sorts of different values I'm going to talk about next. So what do we manage for? Sometimes we manage a forest or some trees to make things out of them. Specifically, that's what we want to do the most. So whether it's lumber, things that we want to build houses out of or buildings out of, sometimes we manage our forests for timber. That's just another word for wood, basically. Sometimes we manage them for conservation. Typically, then we're not doing any timber, but we're trying to conserve or a species or an animal or a plant that we find in that area. Sometimes we manage for wildlife habitat. Sometimes we do some crazy things to manage our forests to prevent wildfires. Wildfires are pretty bad, and I'm going to talk about them, but they're also pretty natural. The risk is sometimes we build our cities and our towns next to forests and we don't want them to burn down. So sometimes we do all sorts of cool things to manage for wildlife mitigation. Mitigation just means reducing the risk of, because we want fewer and fewer wildfires. Sometimes we manage for biodiversity. Almost all of the time we do. And then there's other things like agroforestry. That's a really cool one that you might have heard of, or a food forest, where a set of trees or forests are managed to produce more food and all sorts of different food, which is kind of cool. So here's some examples of those different management styles and what they might look like if you were walking through forest. Primary forest or old growth forest is when it hasn't been touched at all, basically, in the last 100 or more years by humans. You can have tree or forests where we selectively cut some of the species, whether it's to help other ones grow or to take ones that we want out of it. Sometimes we let a forest that was once cut just get old and let it figure itself out. We've got young secondary forests. We've got agroforestry. So we've got all sorts of little plants that are making food, and you can see the trees are spread out. Sometimes we just want to plant a whole bunch of the same tree in the same spot. It's called plantation. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's working the same way a farm does. Farm plants a whole bunch of the same plant in one area because we need that plant. We need that for food. It's the same way, as long as it's done responsibly and in moderation, there's nothing bad about planting trees that we need as people. Sometimes that plantation gets cut, and then sometimes it gets converted into something like a pasture or into some farms. One of the things that I do want to mention, and please do stop me if you have any questions again, because I'm talking a whole lot. But for any place where we manage our forests because we want to cut them down to make things out of, like your tables and your desks and your paper and clothes, for any of those forests, we plan first, then harvest, then you regrow those trees, and then you keep it repeating. You keep the cycle repeating. It's the law. No tree gets harvested without a plan. It's not like we could cut them all down and then figure out what to do with them. Every tree and every block or every section of a forest has a plan before anything happens to it. And that's the law. We regrow every single tree we use here in Canada, both provincial and federal law. So, I want to talk about quickly two different words, conservation and protection. So conservation is provincial guidelines that forest companies that protect certain values, like retaining trees that are used by wildlife. So we move around areas with trees, or we create zones for deer to hang out in the winter. It's called deer wintering zones. Or we protect species at risks and their habitat. Sometimes it talks about the particular mix of tree species and the age that we need to have in there. And it ensures that forests remain connected to meet those wildlife needs. Forest protection, in some cases, means that we create parks or other natural areas where we protect them from any industrial activity, which anyone coming in and taking any of the trees to make something out of it. Something like our national parks or our provincial parks. Hands up if you've been to like a national or a provincial park, even a city park. If you've been to a park this year, hands up. Awesome. Lovely places to be. We want to protect some of the, yeah. Awesome. And sometimes those are protected as well for the marine environments near them, the water around them, historic sites, things like that. So I want to talk about forest management again. To manage our forests here in Canada, we're a pretty big country, and it takes more than 200,000 people to manage our forests. That's how many people work in forestry in some way or another here in the country. And there's a whole bunch of different people doing different jobs. I'll get to the few of them afterwards. These jobs help sustain the forest ecosystem and ensure that the products we need are produced in as sustainable way as possible. Sustainable means we can keep doing it again and again and again forever because the way that we're doing it is responsible and is able to regrow the trees at the same rate. Really important. Now, I work with a lot of people who work in forestry. Well, technically I work in forestry, but I work in an office for the most of the time. I like to get out and get into the trees whenever I can, but I do spend a lot of my time in the office. I ask a lot of people why they chose forestry. People who I work with who work in forestry, whether it's in a mill or out in the woods. And here's some of the answers they gave me. It's a good job, good, well-paying job. It's stable. There's a lot of people who work in forestry in New Brunswick. They get to stay in New Brunswick. A lot of people like living in New Brunswick. I certainly do, and I wanted to make a career here. They feel that it makes a difference. It's important. You get to balance the needs of people and the forest products we need with doing our best to make sure that we're being responsible to our forests. A lot of people choose it just because they get to work outside. They get to take an active role in their environment, which is cool. And in this one, I like to put in there, working in forestry smells good. I know that sounds kind of silly, but if you're working outside, walking through the forest all day, smells good. And if you've ever been to a mill, somewhere where they're cutting trees and they're making them into wood and lumber and stuff, the sawdust and the freshly cut trees smells really, really good. It's the best smelling workplace you could ever ask for. And I enjoy every time I take a tour of a mill, just because it smells really good. Anyway, it's kind of silly, but I like to put it in there. More than anything, most people just like to do something that they're proud of. And a lot of people who work in forestry are very proud of the work they do. Here's just a few of the people that work in forests. So there's people, foresters, who actually create the management plans that figure out how we manage our forests and what we do and what the steps are to regrow and when we're allowed to harvest. And they figure all that stuff out, as well as things like people like forest technicians who help do some of that work, all sorts of cool work like that. A lot of other people work in forestry that you might not think of. People like management and health and safety, which is really important. Sawmills cut wood. There's a lot of big saws. It's really important to be really safe. People work in communications, people like me. I'm not even wearing plaid. I'm not a lumberjack. I still work in forestry. I'm here working in communications, all sorts of things, logistics, human resources, marketing, and then, of course, forest planning, biologists, chemists, a lot of scientists coming up with even, remember when I showed you how many different things are made of trees? Well, people got to invent that and figure out how to make trees into clothes. You don't just chop down a tree and get a t-shirt. There's a lot of steps in between and a lot of really smart people figuring that out in between. So, promise I'll get interactive again. Um, so in New Brunswick, about 24,000 people work in forestry, which is a whole lot. That's hard to necessarily textualize. So I like to say that's roughly 1 in 18 working adults. So if you saw 18 adults as you're going around today, about one of those 18 would be working in forestry. And I've got them in plaid here, one of them in plaid, but they're not all wearing plaid. A lot of them do wear plaid every day. I work in forestry. I'm really proud of it. So this is me recording a video. I've got some cool videos. I mean, I'm not a cool YouTuber, but I am a YouTuber because I make stuff about forestry. Doesn't pay the big bucks. It's not as fun as playing video games on YouTube, but it's still important. So I always like to say I get to be curious for a living because I take things, really deep scientific things, and just try and make it exciting to everyone else. I get to work on some really big advertising campaigns just to combat some of the misconceptions around forestry. I get to talk in policy. I get to help with education, which is something I'm really excited about. Thank you for putting up with me here today. And I'm really proud of my work and the work that is done here in New Brunswick as well. A lot more jobs coming up. I know you're a little young to start thinking about your job, but if you ever want to work outside or work in forestry, there's a lot of upcoming jobs here in New Brunswick, estimated about 10,000 of them, a lot due to retirement and also to some sector growth. But if forestry, if trees are something that you ever get really excited about, there's a job for you here in the province down the line. Don't start worrying about that too much at this point. I want to talk about for a little bit about some of the threats our trees face, because our trees are we have to work harder and harder to help protect them.
Andy,
I
can I
mentioned,
pause you for a minute? I see a
please.
really keen folks right in the front that has his hand up for a very long time. I'm wondering if he has a really good question.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Parker, do you have a question?
He was just stretching.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. I
Oh.
just thought he was really engaged. That's okay. It's okay.
Do you
We'll
have a
open up your question.
Adam? Okay, come on up, my friend.
I watch YouTube videos.
Watch my
Okay.
video? Awesome. I love
So
it.
cool.
I share.
Oh, so you're gonna share the video? All right.
Thank you.
Love it.
I appreciate it. Hope you find something cool about it. No mean comments on it though, okay? I take those personally. It is a cool thing I get to do though. It's really fun. Anyway, so I mentioned one of them earlier. Does anyone know what some things that threaten our trees or some of the things that they face? Anyone remember what I said? Oh, saw a hand shoot up. What do you think?
Forest fires.
Forest fires, wildfires, absolutely. So I've got a picture here.
Oh,
This,
yikes.
yeah, it's scary. Forest fires or wildfires. Forest wildfires are something that are really scary. On one hand, they're natural. It's pretty common. If we look back years and years and years, about half of all wildfires are started by lightning. That's a pretty normal thing to happen. The problem is, as climates get warmer and warmer, wildfires become more and more common. We had some really, really bad ones a few years ago, 2023. Um, that year, more trees burned down than we will cut down in the next 25 years combined. It's really scary, and that's one of the things that we have to do to manage a normal or try and control how much of that happens. And sometimes it's through education. As I said, half of the wildfires start by lightning. Half of them start by people. And they're just people setting a fire and forgetting about it or, not being careful with what they're doing when they're camping or taking their ATV out and accidentally starting a fire. So, has anyone heard of Smokey Bear? Is that something that you guys still hear about as kids? Only you can prevent wildfires? Yeah, cool. I saw some hands shoot up. Well, Smokey Bear is actually North America's oldest advertising campaign, which is really, really cool. He turned over 80 years old this year. And his message is pretty true. You can prevent wildfires, about half of them, by just being really careful whenever you're setting a campfire or when you're out in the woods. Half of them, we do still need to be able to help. Here's a cool story in New Brunswick. So I want to show one of the ways that forest fires or wildfires start is because the tree is dead and dry. And something that kills trees are a lot of times insects. So this little worm-looking guy is a spruce budworm. And one of the things we're really good at here in New Brunswick is stopping them from coming here. So this is a map. Hopefully you recognize this is New Brunswick. And this above us, Quebec. All these yellow and red is the population of this, the spruce budworm. One of the things we do is we take all sorts of little data plots. We keep an eye out for them with little traps out in the woods. And then we spray something that only hurts that particular worm, the spruce budworm, to prevent them from making our trees. And we've been doing a really, really good job of it. In fact, it's called the early intervention strategy. And it's one of the really cool things that's been going on since 2014 that you can see basically all of them stop right at the Quebec New Brunswick border. And we've been doing a really good job of keeping it out. That said, if you pay attention to the news, there's going to be a bigger program this year because there's a bunch in Maine as well. But that's one of many ways we prevent things like wildfire. Because when the tree dies and dries out, it's way more susceptible to burning down. A healthy growing tree, whatever the species may be, is a lot more resistant to wildfire. So I'm going to take you down. I recognize that I only have 10 more minutes with you, so I'm going to speed things up a little bit. I'm going to, might have to unmute this time because I'm going to ask you higher or lower. I want to know how many trees we have in this entire country. So, Mrs. Harvey, can I get you to unmute because I'm just going to ask?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I just want people to shout out. Do we have more or less than 1,000 trees in this country? Shout it out. More. Awesome. You're absolutely correct. We have way more than 1,000 trees. What about 10,000 trees, more or less? More. I heard a lot of more. You're absolutely correct. What about, let's jump up. What about 1,000,000 trees, more or less?
Jump up if you think yes.
Think I heard more mores, which is correct. It's more than that.
Whoa.
What about 100,000,000 trees? Do we have more? You get the pattern here. It's good. We have more than 100,000,000 trees. What about 1,000,000,000 trees? Do we have more?
Whoa.
A billion?
1,000,000,000. All right, we're a little divided on this one. Well, the truth is,
Oh.
are you ready? We have here in Canada 320 billion trees. That's a lot.
Oh my god.
I know. So no, that
Whoa.
billion trees is how many we have. So in the whole world, there's about 3 trillion trees, which means we have 1 in 10 trees in the entire world, all of them here in Canada. That's a lot of trees. It's a really big number. It's why one of the things I like to talk about, and whoever's already watched my video might actually know this, each and every one of you, so yep, you and 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 you each have 8,000 trees. 8,000 trees just for you. So every single person in Canada has 8,000 trees. And together, as Canada, we've got 320 billion trees, give or take a few billion. So I think that's really cool. Hands up if you think it's cool that you have 8,000 trees just for you. Good. I hope so. So I can get into your 8,000 trees a whole lot more, but again, I'm going to respect your time. It's almost the end of the day, at the very least, almost lunchtime. So I want to tell you 3 quick little facts. So of your 8,000 trees, a lot of people worry about how many of them we're going to cut down, how many of them we're losing to pests, things like that spruce budworm, or all sorts of different pests and diseases across the country, and how many are deforested. How many do we cut down that we don't grow back? So of your 8,000, 16 of them we're going to cut each year, roughly. That's to make things like trees or we don't cut trees to make trees, to make lumber, to make paper, to make clothing. More than that, about 20 times more of that are how many we lose each year to pests and diseases, things like that spruce budworm if we don't protect it. It's pretty crazy. Even more in a bad year, we lose to wildfire. Last year wasn't as bad as 2023. And some years are really, really bad. We lose 400 or 500 of your trees to wildfires. One of your trees per year we cut down and we don't grow back. And that is not because we're making forest products out of it, but that's typically because we need to grow our farms or expand our cities because we have more and more people here and we need room for them to live, or we need room to make food for them to eat, or sometimes we need to increase our mining areas or things like that. I have a whole video if you ever want to watch it, as well as a cool little infographic and all sorts of stuff about your 8,000 trees. By the way, this is about what 8,000 trees look like. That's a city park here in Fredericton. That's how many trees each and every one of you have. So you can learn more about them by watching my video or going to our website if you're interested in learning more about your 8,000 trees. All right, speed round. So takeaway, one of the things I want to talk about is if you want to learn a little bit more, and it might be a little advanced, but it's pretty cool as well, is one of the things I said is trees, while they're growing, are collecting carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, air for us to breathe. Part of what's so cool about it is they're taking that carbon and they're storing it. And carbon dioxide is something that is helping contribute to global warming. It's making our Earth, it's making our planet get hotter. That's not a good thing. So if you want to learn a little bit about how much trees actually do, I have a cool little ruler. You might have already mailed it in your class. If not, you can go onto our website and find out how much carbon dioxide is in a tree by printing these rulers or if you have access to them still, you can put them together, wrap it around a tree, and you can learn how much carbon is in it. I think it's really cool. I'm biased because I made it, but I think it's really cool. I did a lot of really complicated math and made some pretty pictures to make sure that that works or semi-accurately. So since we only have one class on here, if you guys try that out in the next week and you send me or Peter a picture of you guys doing that, I'll send you a pizza party. It was going to be a draw based on how many classes attend this. Um, you have a really good chance of winning if you do it. So if you happen to want to try it in the next week, I'll send you a pizza party about it. So pretty good chances. Um, so for Mrs. Harvey, if you're interested and aren't registered, I do have a webinar coming up next week. A lot of this stuff is from this amazing guidebook, and I'm sending them out to free to any teachers who sign up for that. I've got a lot of copies of that. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in learning anything more, there's some great places. Every year, our country puts out a state of the forest, which in a really cool way explains a lot more about our trees and what's actually going on with them, as well as our province does that once every 10 years or so. And I've got some info on our website. Like I said, free webinar. Please tell other teachers about it as well. My office looks like an Amazon warehouse, the amount of packaging material and of these books that I have, and I'd love to send them all out so that I can have my office back. And other than that, I want to thank you all so much for being such great participants. I hope you learned something about a tree. If not, you listened to a guy named Andy Tree for at least an hour. So you did a great job there. I just want to say I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and for participating. And thank you for the invitation.
What do we say, grade 2?
And did you guys hear you're getting a pizza party? Did you guys hear you're getting a pizza party?
If you do the activity.
Oh. Okay.
All
I
we
have
need to
one
do
friend
is-
who has a question. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Adam.
What? How much would be all trees in the whole entire world?
Ooh.
How
many
trees?
trees?
Awesome question. There's about 3 trillion trees, which is a really, really big number. It's 10 times more than how many are in Canada. And Canada's the second biggest country in the world, and we've got a lot of trees here. 3 trillion trees in the world. Great question. Anyone else have any other questions before I let you take off?
Are there any other questions? Rowan. Come on up, my friend.
How many subscribers do you have? Wait, I'm
I think like 600.
Martin, do you have a question? Liam, last question. Come on up, Liam, so Andy can see it.
How much trees is there in a big pile?
Depends.
Yeah.
How much trees is there in a big pile?
Well, it depends on where you are, right?
Yeah. We can
Yeah.
stack a pile pretty high.
Question now.
Martin's case. Come on
How
up.
many zeros are in William?
Oh, how many zeros in 1 quillion?
That's a good question. That I don't know the answer to.
We're going to look into that.
100.
Get back to you.
100.
Okay, last question, Eli.
How many trees are in Japan?
Ooh, how many trees in Japan?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. Now,
We
I
will
would
look that up.
imagine it's less than there are in Canada, because Japan's quite a bit smaller than Canada is. It's several islands, but it's a lot smaller than Canada. So I'm guessing not as many as we have, but they are really well known for their forests and making some really cool trees that are really strong. They have a long history. We actually send some of our trees to Japan. The ones more in British
Oh,
Columbia. We don't do that here in New Brunswick, but very good question. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to Miss Harvey's class and thank you to Peter and to Andy for setting this up. I think you guys were amazing and paid attention so well. And what great questions. Andy, can you just remind Miss Harvey what she needs to do to get that wonderful pizza party?
Yeah, if you want to print out one or several of these carbon rulers, or you can shoot me an email, I can send some to you. But if you want to do that and try the activity outside or send them home, if I can get a picture of your class trying it out, then and in the next week or so, then I'd be happy to send that your way.
That's awesome. We will definitely do that.
Thanks for
Awesome.
coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Andy. You're a natural grade 2 teacher. So, that's always another career option for a forestry person. Thanks everybody for coming. And again, I hope you learned something about forestry and trees. And again, a spark to get you outside and observe and measure some trees. So thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks for setting this up, guys. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.